Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com. I'm going to do a video on picking tomatoes, when to pick them, and just a few considerations along those lines. And I guess this is also a bit of a follow-up, I suppose, because, I don't know, maybe a month ago or so, these tomatoes were all not staked. They were laying all over the ground, and now they all look, you know, I mean, we're getting towards the end of the season, and you can see the foliage is not the best anymore. But as you can see, the results worked out fairly well. Just pan out and show all the tomatoes there. You can see that they all look, you know, I got a pretty good results. A number of people asked me what variety I'm growing here. This is called Premio. Okay, you can see in the size of my hand. They get a little bit bigger than this. One tomato is enough to make a sandwich. Here's one that's a little bit bigger. You can see the two different sizes, right? So I mean, this is enough for one sandwich, right? Unless you want a lot of tomato in your sandwich. Okay, but you know, I have to say they're a fairly disease resistant, good tasting, easy to grow tomato. I usually try a different tomato every year because I just always want to try, you know, the best tomato is the next one, the new one, the one you've never tried before, right? Anyway, picking tomatoes. So it's middle to late September right now, and tonight there's no risk of frost, but this is the time of year where I start watching the forecast on a weekly basis, looking for when there's a risk of frost. If there is a risk of frost, you have to get the tomatoes off the vine, or, and I've done videos on this before, you got to get them, lay everything down. So you just pull your, I mean, they're kind of done growing anyway, but let's say this one here, which is kind of dead. Let's say there was a risk of frost tomorrow, or tonight, and there isn't, but let's just say there was a risk of frost tonight, and I didn't have time to pick everything, I was busy or whatever. All I would do was just yank this out and lay it down, right? And I would do that with all my tomatoes and put a couple canvas tarp or just something. I'll put them on the ground, put something over them for the night, and pick them the next day, sort of thing, right? But as long as they're covered and they're on the ground like this, if you have a light frost or a few frosts, they should be fine. You wouldn't think it makes sense to put them on the ground, but the ground's warmer than being up in the air, right? So it's just easier to cover them as well, but the ground has some heat because it's absorbing heat all day from the sun. Anyway, for picking these, some people have the idea of the sun-ripened, vine-ripened tomato as being the holy grail of tomatoes. But from everything I've read, that really doesn't, that's like a marketing thing. You know, like all of these are at different stages of ripeness, where this one's, you know, fairly ripe, and this one's not, you can see it's not as red. But as long as, you know, you bring these inside, if I just left them in a bowl like this, they would ripen. If I put them in a brown paper bag or a closed cardboard box where the gases can't escape, there's a gas that comes off of these that accelerates the ripening process. So they will continue to ripen indoors. But what about a tomato like this, right? Even less red. That will ripen too. Or a tomato like this, even less red. That will ripen as well. So if there's a risk of frost and you have the time, you bring everything in. I mean, and the many of the green ones will ripen, some of them won't. Like here's two green ones. Okay, I would expect both of these to ripen because you can see this one has a bit of color, and so does this one. Right, so if I had a variety of tomatoes, right, this will ripen first, then this one, then this one, then this one, but they're all going to ripen. Even tomatoes that are completely green, sometimes they'll ripen, sometimes they won't. There's something happening inside the tomato. I don't want to get into the details of it, but there's something happening in the tomato that makes it mature. And if it's past the point, you can't always see that. Usually if there's some color, it's definitely happened. But even if there's no color, that thing might have happened, right? So even the green tomatoes, some of them will ripen and some of them just will not ripen, okay? Another thing you can do if you have a place to put them, like a garage or something like that, that doesn't freeze, is you just take the entire vine, cut it off at the base, and you hang the vine upside down. That's not a good example, but like a cherry, like I got a cherry tomato plant there, right? So you can just hang that upside down indoors somewhere. and just take the ripe ones off as they ripen. That's another, if it's, you know, it can just be quicker and easier, right, to do that, although they're going to start falling off when they get completely ripe. But a lot of people will do that. They'll take the vine of cherry tomatoes into their garage, where, let's say you've got a heater that just keeps the garage from going below zero. You just hang them like that, maybe in front of a window or something, and every couple days you can go out and pull off the ripe ones. That's another way to deal with tomatoes when they're getting ripe. But for today, there's no risk of frost, so I'm just out here picking the ones that are, you know, pretty ripe. If there was a risk of frost, I'd pick everything, right? I don't know to what extent picking the ripest ones accelerates the ripening of the ones that aren't ripe yet. But it seems to stand to reason, doesn't it? But I really don't know if that's the case. But the ones that are ripe are the ones you're going to use, right? Those are the good tasting ones. Those are the ones you're going to use in your salads and your dishes and sharing with your friends and making sauces and, you know, whatever you're going to do with your tomatoes. So it makes sense to come out this time of year, every day or almost every day, pick all the ripe ones and then find something to use them in. Anyway, just a short video on when to pick tomatoes, how ripe they need to be before you pick them. They don't really, you can pick them at any stage really, right? You pick as many as you can deal with unless there's a risk of frost. And then you got to either get the whole thing covered, get everything down on the ground and covered, or get everything indoors, because these are tropical plants and they're not built for frost and things like that. They can't take it. The skin of the tomato will damage, right? And all these ones that aren't ripened, they're just not going to ripen, okay? And they're going to look all gross and not be as appetizing as they would otherwise be. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast at maritimegardening.com. Check out my weekly article at maritimegardening.substack.com. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.